Hello, friends. So, welcome to the podcast. Um, I want to talk about virtue and how, virtue meaning, it's a very beautiful word, but basically meaning, goodness, um, and how it can depend on the context. Some things are better than others. That's true. Gold is more useful than tin, I guess, or gold is more useful than arsenic. Arsenic can kill some people. Gold can be used as money. It can be used for electronics. It can be used for jewelry. It doesn't tarnish, all that. Or food's more useful than, a Nintendo. Which would you rather have if you could only have one? So in the same way, the actions of humans, obviously, like, some things are better than others. You rescue someone from a building, from a fire, that's, more morally virtuous than setting a building on fire. There's differences. But I think something that kind of it seems like, especially these days, it seems like maybe that could be a bit clearer. People, maybe, at least some people, don't seem to kind of keep this in mind. But so I'm just going to mention it. Um, is that, like, yeah, contextual virtue. So, say, and I'll give you the punchline up front. Basically, I would say someone who is a pretty, bad person, and let's say there's some oligarch somewhere who's kind of manipulating society, having, suppressing information, um, starting, kind of conflicts, among people, uh, and just kind of draining resources, exploiting people, lying. Um, that person could be more morally, in one sense, more morally virtuous than someone who is, vegetarian and, you know, um, kind of maybe, I don't know, let's say volunteers to help people, and, say, doesn't swear, and, always tries to be friendly, and, is a good friend, is reliable. Well, how could that be possible? Well, where did they start from? If the person who's some, madman oligarch, if let's say, for simplicity, let's say they're both men, all right? So he is, if his parents were much worse, and all of his friends are much worse, and all of his social circle, everyone in his world that he's been introduced to, and which gives him a sense of belonging, and people who understand his past, and, his private dreams, etc., his where he comes from, if they're much worse, then by him being like, oh yeah, well, I I kind of manipulate the world and stuff, but, like, I have limits where I try to do it in a way which doesn't really hurt people that much. Like, I try to allow, people, I don't, kill people. I don't, I'm not involved in, like, the slave trade or anything. Everyone I know is involved in the slave trade. Let's say you've got someone like that. Why are they, why are they not just doing the human thing of fitting into their circle, their environment? Something inside them is pushing towards the good, or pulling them. And so that's the power of their conscience. Their consciousness is their awareness of what is true and what's right. And no one's perfect, but if they can be, not only, one of the worst of their, kind of social group, who are, they've been born and raised in that. That's all they know, this dark kind of ways of manipulating people and perceiving other people outside of their circles or their class as, in some way implicitly subhuman, and, not really the same as them, and they're otherized, and they're allowed to be, exploited. If they're able to resist that to some significant extent, that's very impressive, and that shows, okay, that's morally virtuous. You're moving in the right direction. If you keep doing that, you'll end up in the right place. compare that to, say, the person who's volunteering and vegetarian and, is a good friend, and yada, yada, yada. If they were, let's say they were raised by parents who are exactly like that, they were vegetarian, they were, because they want to help the world, they want to do this, all those things, if they're just as good, they haven't made any improvement, then that kind of shows like zero movement. So in terms of their soul pushing for self-improvement, and there's always improvements possible, if they haven't found room to improve, then that kind of shows in this certain metric we're looking at, they're less morally virtuous than the oligarch who's still doing all these terrible things, but is moving in the right direction, because that requires struggle against, elements of yourself which aren't fully under your control. And so it seems the oligarch's trying, this other person's just resting on their laurels. And did they choose their family? Did they choose the social norms they were born into? No, unless you think, let's not go there. To keep it simple, let's say no. Most people would say no, they're just born like by chance there. So or else, it happened as momentum of, certain things. But let's say it's just they didn't choose that. It's just, okay, there you are. Then, they haven't caused, they haven't earned, a moral admiration there, right? They've done nothing, basically. So, so you can see in that extreme example, someone who's doing much worse things, if they show that compared to their culture, they're where are you in the context of your culture? Now, another example would be, say, people like, the founders of, the founding fathers of the USA, who've been getting, a hard time from some quarters these days, who are like, they're slave owners and they're all, evil and bad, blacks didn't have the right, to, they weren't, it's like, all men are born equal. Oh yeah, but, they had slaves. Well, yeah, true. It's but a few things like all but I think only one of the colonies, all but one of them, was it two? I think it was all but one of them had agreed like that, yeah, they would abolish slavery. But one of them didn't want to, and they couldn't persuade them. And they had agreed like, look, we're all or nothing, because they were like, it was very likely they were going to get obliterated by the British, and all of them would be executed, and their chance for freedom and a society of dignity and rule of law, etc., would be wasted. And so they made the decision that, okay, well, we can't, this colony's not going to budge. So the other 12, I think it was, were like, okay. And so they made that sacrifice, even though it was against what they wanted. So, but never mind that, even if they were all for slavery, that was normal at that time in history, and all around the world, it was normal. And actually in the English speaking world, it was the first part of the world, I think, well, at least in current times, where slavery was abolished, right? And then, the British Navy went around trying to prevent the slave trade. But it was normal back then, right? Like everyone was doing this. It was like, you go and conquer another country, you kill all the men, you rape all the women, you sell everyone into slavery, you steal all the stuff, and that's that. Everyone does that. That's normal, you know? So in the context of the time, someone who doesn't do that is like, whoa, amazing, very morally virtuous. And we should recognize that. But also someone could be a very good person, but that's just one of the blind spots they don't notice. Like maybe someone never noticed that slavery was wrong, because that was just, what does a fish know of the water in which it swims? That was just normal for them. And so they could, over the course of their lifetime, they could make great strides in terms of their understanding, becoming a much more understanding, intelligent, knowledgeable person. So that takes work, and that's very useful to everyone. And so, so if it's in service to truth and love, that is. But But let's say they did that and they paired it with, yeah, they were becoming a better person. They were becoming more empathetic, more conscientious, more, mirthful and humorous, more, braver, kinder. Maybe they treated their slaves very well, much better than the other people around them. So they're showing all this movement towards moral improvement, just because they were born into a context where their starting point is much behind our starting point. That doesn't make you or me better than them. In fact, I think, in the future, it's going to be the same thing. Thank God, if things are going well, then standards get raised and raised throughout history. And so a time may come 100 years from now where people are like, oh, look at the way they these, back in the day, these humans were just putting, chemicals all over the place. They were washing they're afraid of some virus, right? And so they're washing their hands religiously, and, they're spraying surfaces, and they're spraying down whole gardens, and just in general, pesticides, on the farms. And, normal people, could be very good people. Most people I know do this is in their kitchens. They've got, they're not really too aware of maybe, or too concerned about using more ecologically friendly chemicals that have been tested for, like, washing dishes, or for your laundry, or for your shower, washing your body. Never mind your own health, but just the effect it has on the ecosystem and the water, and then the fish that are in the water, and, or, the insects around, and the birds that are eating the insects, and, et cetera, and so on and so on. So, there's good evidence that a lot of these chemicals are bad for nature, for the ecosystems, but there's just this huge pipeline of funneling. By the time they get approved without much study, because the regulatory agencies are captured by the industry. They're like, basically conflict of interest. They're making money off it. The people involved in the regulatory industry either worked for, or will work for, or are friends with, or are getting, deals with the industry. That's very common in many industries these days. And so I would say most industries. And so they can, these chemicals are approved, even though, and then, by the time we figure out, oh, these are really bad for things, they get pulled, but they've done a lot of damage. And by that point, there's more chemicals coming on, and we can't keep up. And often they don't get pulled. Like, there's certain ones, neonicotinoids, which are these kind of they work on the nicotine receptor or something. There are these pesticides which have been banned in Europe a long time, or like, a few years ago already, maybe almost 10 years ago or something, not sure, 5-10 years ago. And in the USA, and I guess other countries, definitely USA, they're still used, but they are collapsing bee populations. It's terrible. So that's not the point, but it serves as an example that, these chemicals are being put out there. And, 100 years from now, people could be looking back like, oh my God, how could they just be poisoning Mother Nature like that? What bad people. They could take a statue of, whoever it is, let's say, Tim Johnson, all right, and who could have been a really good person in 2023, doing all these good things, but he washed his hands with what, and what did he wash his clothes with, and what was he doing, and he had some vegetables outside, and he was using chemical fertilizer, and nasty chemical bug sprays, or pesticides. And they could go, yeah, let's tear down his statue, And so in Europe, or, the West, there's all these statues, which, during I guess, I don't know how recently it's still happening, but like within the last few years, that was a big thing, like, pulling down, Leopold II or whatever in Belgium, and pulling down these statues, like, we know so much better than them. And it's like, well, I think we should have a bit more grace and be aware that we could do amazing work and be like the most virtuous people that have ever existed. And still, there will come a time when compared to the standards of the more uplifted future, we will be just as far back as Leopold II was, and they would, by that logic, be able to tear down our statues. And perhaps it would be wiser to see ourselves in all beings and understand none of us are perfect. And, it's relative to where we come from. We need these standards to try to, encourage us to meet. However, it's like, mercy seasons justice, that old thing, from Shakespeare, Edward de Vere, that, the balance there, which is, I guess, is a religious concept, I think, from Christianity, like that there's Christ is just, but also, and judging, but also merciful, or God is. And so, yeah, I think like if someone was doing terrible things in the past, or, the British, what they did to my, native, so to speak, Ireland, my, the land of my parents and ancestors going way back or whatever, and then, they also did to many places, including Australia, where I was born and raised. But, like learning about Irish history, it's pretty intense, and seeing the trauma and the harm that came from the British Empire. But like, I keep in my, I guess, thank God, I've got some, basic understanding of spirituality and, and have the practice of spirituality, more importantly. So I can understand, oh, right, that was their context. They thought, oh, there's these rebels causing problems for our glorious, beautiful empire. And I can, feel that. And I can put myself in their shoes and see the beauty of their dreams and, and I can see their blind spots, sure. But so I can say, yeah, this was wrong, what happened in Ireland. And I can point these things out in order so that we, but forgive, but don't forget, and so that we can make the future a bit better. But at the same time, you have to be aware that people, are doing the best they can in the situation they're in. And even if they're not trying on some level, maybe they're trying to try, or they're trying to try. And anyway, they are where they are. And even if they're trying, like we say before, right? It's apart from this objective standard, there is this kind of like, I think, more important test of like how much are you trying to move forward from where you are, So, and like, the same thing applies with like, babies and stuff. If you like a little baby, starting to crawl, you'd be like, that's amazing, great work. And, the amount of effort it takes objectively, like, oh, you're not even walking. Like, why am I so excited about this? When, I can see someone else go running and be like, yeah, what, you want a medal? Like, you're just running. What's the big deal? Or someone could cartwheel. I go, oh yeah, you'll probably practice that. You're what, 30? You can cartwheel? All right, cool. Good for you. The crawling's more impressive because it's relative to the context, contextual virtue. In this case, not a moral virtue, but more of everything's moral in some sense, but it's more just about, the virtue of, say, capacity and, exploration and competence and ability. And so it's a good thing that the baby is growing. Like, it's a good thing that the flower blooms. And you can take a drawing from a little kid and go, oh, wow, that's really good. You're very talented. You're 3 years old and you're drawing like not just stick men, but like, it's like prisms, or is that the word? Not prisms. What do you call that? Shapes, What's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, I'm not sure actually. Oh, that's a good question. What is that word for like enclosed shapes, And so they, hello, old friend, word for enclosed shapes. Mercurial, elusive. I will find you still. That's for 3 years old. That's, you're much better than most people are. So, that could be more impressive than, someone who can draw something really realistic, but, yeah, you're 15 and, that's not that crazy for a 15-year-old or, or let's say a 50-year-old. make it. So that's the basic idea. I think we should have more empathy and mercy, and just, just a more awareness around, the failings of people. Like at the moment, there's all, Israel and Palestine. There's this whole, baying for war, and all the terrible things happening on both sides. Um, and you'd have to look into it much deeper to figure out who's, you know, exactly what each side are doing, and is one side, significantly better or worse than the other, I haven't looked into it enough to know that, but I could see it from both sides. And then, Ukraine and Russia, and, Yemen, and, USA, and, Saudi Arabia. And there's all these, China and Taiwan, and there's all these different places where there's these conflicts going on. And you can see that some people are just trying to cause problems because they like the pain, the energy of it. It's like, what do you call that? Sadism. And then you have people who are doing it because, they're just psychopaths, and they want to just, you manipulate people to get their narrow self-interest, money, power, status, scratch the itches that occur to them. And they're basically slaves to their impulses, these people. And so they're, in a way, I would say, I wouldn't want to be born like that and do all these terrible things, and you couldn't control yourself. Maybe you say they can control themselves. Good point. That's a philosophical question. I don't know the answer there. Is evil, can evil be a conscious choice? I don't know. I think no, but I'm not sure. I don't know. I think it's like a dream state kind of thing they're locked into, but I'm not sure. But anyway, and then, but most people around the world, I think it's ideological when they do bad things. From their point of view, they really believe they're doing good things. And even the psychopath believes that it's good. They just believe that, no, goodness isn't like a universal thing. That's stupid. What goodness really is being good to yourself. And so they're just trying to do good. They're trying to succeed, play the video game of life well. They're trying to, but meanwhile, most people would have a broader conception of, oh, no, good is what is good for my tribe, my people, my nation, or it's good for my, political affiliation, or good for my gender, these tribal instincts. And then more universalist people go, oh, no, good is what's good for all beings, and but what's happening is that in all these cases, it's good for what is perceived as the self. If you're a universalist, kind of, shout out to the Buddha, Siddhartha here. What's up? If you're from that kind of persuasion of mind, then it's just you see yourself as the whole tree. You're a little branch here, you're a little person, but you're also the whole tree. The tree is the branch. The branch is the tree. The branch does not exist separate to the tree, or it's a stick. It's dead, but so there's the tree and the branch, and the branch and the tree. And so again, it's just, you're doing good for the self, basically, and so anyway, the point is, everyone's got their own point of view and their cultural narratives that they've been trained to believe and have learned, and everyone's doing their best according to their own definitions. And I think there's many opportunities to say, or there could be someone in Hamas who is saying, hey, guys, let's not like rape people and, kill civilians. That's not right. We should stick to fighting soldiers. That's, like, that's the only right thing. And then even though they're part of Hamas, well, they're in, say they're in Gaza, and they feel like they don't have sovereignty, and they're frustrated and feel the Israelis haven't been fair about, genuinely trying to find a balanced diplomatic or political solution. And so they might be, you could say, more moral than someone who is, on a keyboard at home saying like, oh, this is terrible, and talking all this talk about peace, but then actually not really doing anything in their own life to try to bring more peace about, or be more courageous or more virtuous. Maybe, just poisoning their body with bad, health choices, and, kind of being an unfaithful friend, flaking out, half the time, or, so on and so forth. So yeah, I think we need mental flexibility in judging, virtue. And it's not just the objective standards which we need, these ideals to live up to, which we negotiate, where is it exactly? But we do need that, these goals. But then, so that's like the judgment, or the judge. And you can fail to meet that. But then we also need, mercy. We need the father and the mother, masculine and feminine consciousness, I guess. So that's it. And so I think the beautiful thing about this is, both for yourself, you can be like, oh, I've been doing terrible, but right now I'm just going to do a little bit to be a little bit better. I want to finish off this day as well as I can, and then you can feel like, wow, I was in a pretty bad, just like, a funk, like wasn't the right day. And it would have been so easy to stay on that momentum. In fact, it was very hard to not just stay in that momentum. But instead, I got a little, I got 20 minutes at the end of my day where I actually had a totally different energy, and I actually did something good for myself and thus for the universe. And it was a bit different, even if it was a small thing, that might seem like nothing, but that's actually a great achievement and a greater gift to the collective by raising the vibration of the universe or the planet and the species, than someone who is just, happy and, friendly and, helping people, but it's all from momentum and just the way, they've always been living or the way they were taught to live. And so I guess the invitation out of this is both to ourselves and to all beings, past, present, future, here, there, everywhere, to forgive and to understand that, no one's perfect. And, on some level, it seems like we're all doing the best we can. And on another level, it seems like, well, some people aren't doing, they're not trying, and other people are trying a lot more, And I think, yeah, we can celebrate people who seem to be trying more, and that's beautiful. And that opens up a lot of room to celebrate and appreciate and encourage people to be, yeah, keep doing that, And so I can say, I think there's some terrible things going on in the world with censorship and control and these attempts to kind of install some sort of one world government with, like, through WHO pandemic treaty and like the WEF and the Davos, billionaires boys club, as RFK would call them, and the UN being heavily corrupt, and all kinds of things like this. The move towards central banking digital currencies, CBDCs, and the whole COVID thing, and the security state kind of apparatus that's being brought in, and the whole using of climate change to that end too. Seemingly, all these things. There's all these moves to control the world, right? But then what's really useful in terms of staying balanced and resisting that and kind of trying to heal that and move it in a better direction to redeem that, and rescue that, is that there's a lot of people involved in that who believe they're trying to do the right thing. And so if we can have the awareness that, yeah, okay, we need to, counteract this and take action against it, and, remain, aware and educated and active. But also that, yeah, there's so many people involved in this whole thing where they're just trying to do good, and so I can celebrate that they're trying to do good, even if I can disagree with them about what good means, and it's quite a beautiful thing. And I think it's quite unifying. And I think at the end of the day, all these problems stem out of the ego and the human mind dividing itself from the world, and dividing the world up into many little pieces through labeling it with language and failing to just have pure consciousness and just be with life, be one with life. But that division, that separation, the fragmentation of the ego, the false self from reality, whereas we're all one in truth, that you can be very high consciousness and trying to help the world, but if you're perceiving people as like out there and despicable, and there's a cognitive dissonance where you're not integrating that with the fact that they're you living another life and we're all branches on the one tree, then I think that can kind of be self-perpetuating the dark energy and the conflict. And so we can heal a lot of things by being aware of, like, recognizing where people are being virtuous within their context, and kind of even while we use our words and our actions to combat what we perceive to be unhealthy, and they combat us in the way they perceive us to be unhealthy. If we can approach it from a point of view of unity and appreciation, then that could really confuse some people on the margins and go, wait a minute, what's going on here? And maybe the energy of love could do works and magic. But also for ourselves, we will keep a good energy and a peaceful energy in these challenging times, when I think planet Earth really needs a lot more peace and a lot more clear-headedness and clear conscience and warm-heartedness and groundedness. So that's it. So yeah, I been a long day. The microphone is in a room with a sleeping baby, so I'm just talking to the computer. So, and Zoom seems to do, which is how I record my thingies. There seems to be blocking the microphone when I play guitar. So I'm going to give a little bit of music, of improvisational gangster scat music. Not really, but let's go. I've been feeling the song of the ages through this episode, thinking about just through time, the times ahead, the times that have gone past before us, and that it's all contextual virtue, and that we're all trying to do our best to evolve. And so here's a song for the ancients and for the future ancients. Should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? Should old acquaintance be forgot and days of old lang syne? For old lang syne, my dear, for old lang syne, we'll take a cup of kindness yet for days of old lang syne. Well, there's a hand my trusty fear, and gaze a hand of thine. Well, many ways we'll reaved and woe in days of old lang syne. For old lang syne, my dear, for old lang syne, we'll take a cup of kindness yet for days of old lang syne. Amen. See you next week.